Give me liberty or give me death. Those words from Patrick Henry have been revolutionary since they were spoken in 1775. And they are a defining set of words in American history. Now, Henry began not all that impressively in 1736. That's when he was born in Virginia. He tried his hand as being a storekeeper and trying some other things, failed miserably. He eventually became a lawyer, and there he found his mark. He was fabulous. He was famous across Virginia. Think of one of those trial lawyers you see on TV. That was Patrick Henry. He was able to parlay that success into a political position. He was elected to the House of Burgesses. Think of it as the Virginia Legislative Assembly. And when he started, there was a clique that was really dominating Virginia politics. And it looked like everything was going to just go along, and Henry was just going to have to find his way in that Legislative Assembly. But then England passed the Stamp Act. And the Stamp Act was really the first major way in which the British tried to tax the colonies without representation. And the major clique that was dominating the Virginia House of Burgesses was willing to go along, but not Henry. And much to the surprise of the people of Virginia as well as the Legislative Assembly, he produced a set of resolutions condemning the Stamp Act in very broad and bold strokes. And even more magnificently, they were passed. And this was really the first legislative challenge to the Stamp Act in the colonies. And that spurred a revolution of sorts of opposition against the Stamp Act. And eventually, England backed off. And Henry had left his mark in American history, the first time. But the British, of course, weren't done, and they eventually started passing other acts that were oppressive. And the forefront of the opposition came from Boston, and fighting had broken out. And the question, perhaps the pivotal question in American history, was going to be whether or not that Boston rabble was going to be left off by its own, or whether the other colonies were going to unite behind their brethren. Henry had no doubt about it. He marched into the House of Burgesses on March 23rd of 1775, and he proclaimed that it was time for the colonists to unite behind the Boston freedom fighters. And of course, there was a lot of hesitation in Virginia and elsewhere. And Henry laid that aside, and he said, "It is in vain, sir, to extenuate the matter. Gentlemen may cry, peace, peace, but there is no peace. The war is already begun. Why stand we here idle? Is life so sweet, or peace so dear, as be purchased at the price of chains and slavery? Forbid it, Almighty God. I know not course what others may take, but for me, give me liberty or give me death." He had just created the closing argument for why the colonists should rebel. Jefferson said that he had set the ball of the revolution in motion. Eventually, the revolutionaries took hold of the rest of the colonies. We declared independence about a year later, and Henry was at the forefront of that independence movement. He became the wartime governor of Virginia during a perilous time in American history, fighting for our freedoms. Now, interestingly, he was not a supporter of what eventually became the Constitution. He didn't like the fact that there was a consolidation of power in the federal government in what would become Washington, D.C. He wanted to make sure that the liberty and freedom that he had fought for was preserved on our own soil. And one of the things that he pointed out was it was lacking, the proposed Constitution was lacking a Bill of Rights. And he railed on that for several months. And eventually, Madison and others assured those that were ratifying the Constitution that a Bill of Rights would be the first order of business when the Constitution was approved. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. So he left his mark in another way, making sure that our Constitution protected our inalienable rights by ensuring that a Bill of Rights was approved. Henry is a magnificent figure in American history, too often forgotten, too often left to the side. Spend a few minutes spreading the word of his great historical importance. And don't forget, he meant it, and we should too. Give me liberty or give me death.